Hey there, my name is Dr. Tim Gravoy, and I'm the Executive Director of TGS Educational Consulting. And I'm so glad that you are here with us for this session on self-care and compassion satisfaction. We're going to learn a lot. It's going to be a powerful session. And I really do hope that we'll be approaching this entire kind of content in a way that you really haven't really thought about self-care before. Before we get started, I always want to just have a chance to share about some of the people that are always on my mind and on my heart right now. This is my daughter. My daughter is 7 years old. She has had a very big week because not only did she learn how to tie her shoes, she also lost her first tooth. So we're very excited about that. And she has saved her tooth in a baggie right here, because she had a very clear plan and protocol for how she wanted to engage with the tooth fairy that particular evening. So there we go. She's got some toast and she's got her loose tooth. It was just a very big day that particular day. This right here is my oldest. This is at the superintendent's concert here in Tucson Unified School District, and she plays in the percussion ensemble. I'm really excited that she's going to be in the jazz band, but this was a really neat performance, and I'm glad that she got a chance to be a part of it, and I'm proud that I got to watch her just increase her skills as a musician. It was really neat, and she was really proud to be there. This right here is my son. We were at the park here in Tucson, and we were playing Pokemon Go on my phone, but he wanted us to take a picture of us playing Pokemon Go, which is kind of interesting, because if you know anything about the game, it's the game you play on your phone. So I was like, oh, okay, I guess we could take a screenshot. It's like, no, I want a picture of us playing Pokemon Go. I'm like, oh, all right, kiddo. So we took a selfie, and this is a picture of my son playing Pokemon Go with me at a park not too long ago. This right here is a picture of some amazing caring professionals here. They are teachers in Yuma, and this happens to be one of my very favorite PDs that I get to do. A lot of the work that I do has to do with behavior interventions and mental health supports for students. This particular one is on creating inclusive classrooms for students with ADHD. And I'll give this one to you for free, that one of the best, most evidence-based, not medicine interventions that we have for students with ADHD is time outdoors and physical activity. So in this PD, we don't just learn about physical activity. We go outside and explore our campus as a place for outdoor learning and opportunities to incorporate physical activity into the learning day. This right here is one of my best friends in the world. His name is Michael. We have been friends since first grade. It's been a long time since we had a chance to hang out, and we just made time for each other. So I got the kids together. We got a chance to just to spend some time together at the park in Gilbert, and it was just really nice to connect with them again, for sure. So I hope that for all of you who've got those friends who've been in your life for a real long time, if you haven't been in touch, I definitely encourage you maybe to send that text today, because it just was just a really special time to have a chance to be together too. Now, always during the live session, as we get started with this, I will always stop and I'll just invite people to share what might be on their mind and on their heart. Now, this slide won't work the same way because it's a video session, but just the same, it's a good idea to just take a chance to just acknowledge, wherever you might have been the second before you press play on this video, and just sort of notice what you might be thinking about, what you might be feeling. Whatever it is exactly the right thing to be thinking and feeling, because you have the brain and heart that you got. And so maybe take a breath if you'd like. You don't have to, because I'm not in charge of your lungs. I can't make you breathe and don't want to make you do nothing, honestly. But if you'd like to, I like to enjoy a breath and just maybe think, what's on your mind? What's on your heart? It could be, oh, I need to unload the dishwasher. It could be, oh, what's for dinner? It could be, oh, I can't wait for the weekend because I'm going to see my grandbabies. Whatever it is exactly the right thing. And I hope you had a chance just to acknowledge it and honor that, and to honor that pause just a little bit as we stop and think. Now, as we get started, I just want to share, I'm going to be sharing a sad story, just a sad story that involves grief. It involves it involves loss of someone that we care about by suicide. And the reason why I'm sharing this story just in this space of self-care right here is to kind of think about self-care a little bit differently. And so if this particular story is not a story that you can hear right now, feel free to fast forward to the next slide where we won't be talking about grief and suicide anymore. But in any case, I just wanted to have a chance to introduce you to some other people that are really just important to me. This is this guy right. This is me, of course. This is me. That's also me. This is my partner, LaShawn, right here. This is one of my best friends in the world, Bert. This is another one of my best friends in the world, Dakota. I'm really lucky. There's like about 4 or 5 people in the world right now that I would consider to be my best friends, and 3 of these folks are here right here. Obviously, LaShawn's my partner. He's a best friend in a different kind of way. But Dakota and Bert are people who I love very much and mean an awful lot to me. At the end of last November, Dakota decided that he was done being alive anymore. Decided that he was done being alive. He'd been struggling with some mental health stuff for a long time. And we just had to come to understand that that mental health conditions can sometimes be terminal. They can be so bad that they can be terminal. And it was a really sad time. It was a very just deep sadness, deep grief, deep sense of loss that somebody that we love so much and that I love so much was just gone. Was just gone very suddenly and gone in a way that was really hard to understand and really hard to comprehend. And especially at first, when just in those stage of the early days of grief, a lot of people would say to me, "Hey, Tim, you really need to make sure you're taking time to practice self-care." And I know that they meant well. I know that they meant well. But honestly, the grief that I was feeling at the time honestly felt like this big, giant 300-pound steel ball that was red hot and covered in razor wire, honestly, that I was holding with my bare hands. And when I was kind of trying to hold that grief together, I just didn't have time and space to really contemplate what self-care could mean. However, the folks that would, take my kids on play dates, the folks that would sit with me while I ate a grilled cheese sandwich, the folks that would just, send me a text just letting me know that they were thinking of me. Like, those are the folks that created the space for me to do the things I knew I needed to do to care for myself, to take a shower, to eat something, to, continue to go to the gym. And so as we think about self-care, especially when we work in jobs that will take 110% of us if we let it, it's really important to think about. It's not so much about, am I eating enough vegetables or drinking enough water? A lot of times the self-care that we do from the inside out is very important, but also that self-care that our organization can do from the outside in can also create time and space for self-care in some really important ways. So I just want to kind of think about that a little bit as we think about self-care. It's not so much about self-caring our way out of, the worst possible situations we might be feeling. It's more about just recognizing that we are worthy of the same kind of love and respect that we direct towards others from time to time ourselves. So a lot of times too, just this idea of, hey, make sure to take time for self-care. It's kind of like when I was carrying this 300-pound ball of grief shortly after Dakota had died. The check engine light was kind of already on. And a lot of us, especially if we work in schools, it can feel, very similar to that, where the check engine light is already on. And then somebody looks at us and says, "Hey, your check engine light is on." Like, yes, I know it's on. I know it's on. I know I need to attend to it, but I literally can't attend to it right now because there's a million things I'm supposed to be doing right now. And going to the mechanic just isn't one of them. And self-care can sometimes be like that too, where it's like, yes, I know I should go to the dentist. I know, but I've got dental insurance stuff I got to figure out. I've got to, take time off work that I can't afford. There's all sorts of reasons why I haven't just gone to the dentist. I know I need to do it, but there are some barriers in my way. And so, sometimes when I hear this advice of, hey, it's really important to make time for self-care. Yes, it is. But it's not necessarily as simple as that. And it usually isn't as simple as that for most people. And so as we kind of approach this, we'll be approaching this work just a little bit differently. Now, those of us who work in caring professions, we know that it's hard work, but it's also important to understand that there are some costs of caring that we might be paying without really realizing it. And those costs of caring are compassion fatigue, secondary traumatic stress, and burnout. And here are the signs of compassion fatigue, secondary traumatic stress, and burnout. So with compassion fatigue, we might feel lowered empathy. We might feel detached or numb. We might feel overwhelmed by work or even experience some self-isolation or withdrawal. In secondary traumatic stress, we'll feel physical fatigue, reduced productivity. We'll feel some feelings of sadness, despair, hopeless, or anxiety. And secondary traumatic stress is a really specific kind of cost of caring here. It's a kind of cost of caring that we might experience when we're caring for those who've been victims of trauma themselves, and the barrier between, or the boundary between, somebody else's suffering and our own suffering starts to dissolve quite a bit. So it's kind of like, if, my friend and I go on a hike here in the desert, and where we live in Tucson, sunburn is a very real possibility. If my friend gets sunburned, it makes sense that my friend would feel kind of the pain and discomfort of that sunburn. It wouldn't make a lot of sense for me to feel that pain of my friend's sunburn, right? So if my friend is sunburned, I shouldn't be the one to feel it. Secondary traumatic stress, though, is exactly like that. This is where a lot of times caregivers can take on other people's trauma when they're working with people who've experienced trauma as well. And so it's important for us just to be mindful of that boundary. And burnout is really just a symptom of overwork, where there's just a lack of accomplishment or efficacy. Like if I work as hard as I'm trying to work, but no matter how hard I work, I don't seem to accomplish what I want to. I don't seem to be that effective at the job I'm setting out to do. That leads to exhaustion. And I'm not talking about like the tired I might feel after working, an 8-hour day. I'm talking about just the exhaustion I'm feeling when I don't have any energy left to give. And that also leads to detachment from your job. Now, all of these different costs of caring present differently. They're distinct, and there's nuances between them. But I do notice in the symptoms a lot of interrelated symptoms, a lot of interrelated kinds of conditions here that look very, very similar to me. And as I was reading all of the literature, about this, about like 52 articles, to be honest, to get started with this, I really had to wonder, is there something that's tying them all together? And honestly, it seems like moral injury is it. What shows up in the literature is this idea of moral injury. And so to kind of illustrate this just a bit, we've got moral injury is at the center of this fidget spinner, the least fun fidget spinner I've ever experienced here. And we've got the three prongs of this being the other costs of caring: compassion fatigue, burnout, and secondary traumatic stress. And they all orbit moral injury. So you can think about moral injury as being the root cause of all of the costs of caring that we'll talk about in this particular session. So what is moral injury? Moral injury is an emotional wound that we suffer when we are required to work in a way that violates our values, or without the resources, capabilities, or authority to accomplish what is expected. Now, actually, a really good friend of mine, her name is Marisol Badia, was sharing me another type of moral injury that I also think we need to consider is when we are working to affect change in a system that the structure itself of the system will not allow us to affect change, where no matter what we do, the system itself is fighting against the change that needs to happen. And so folks that are really concerned about equity and justice, which is just about everybody in a caring profession that I know working in education, that systemic moral injury is also a really important thing to consider as well. And the consequences of that moral injury are compassion fatigue, burnout, and secondary traumatic stress. All right, so if moral injury really is at the center of all of this, then we really can't think of self-care as being the first thing that we think about here in terms of how do we address the cost of caring, like compassion fatigue and burnout and secondary traumatic stress. If we want to think about addressing these costs of caring, we're going to have to start thinking about the moral injury that's at the root of all of this. And the good news is that there are some sources of power that we can step into to help us address moral injury at any level. And those sources of power that we've got available to us are institutional authority, direct action, the unplug, plug-in strategy, and creative noncompliance. Now, we're only going to talk about direct action and creative noncompliance in this particular session just for time, and also just because they tend to be the two that educators and other caring professionals just tend to use a little bit more frequently, and just with a bit more nuance as well. But real quickly, I'll talk about what institutional authority and the unplug plug-in strategy are, because they are also ones that we might be able to use too. And so just briefly, institutional authority is the authority that we receive simply by virtue of the job that we were hired to do. So there are certain things that if I am a teacher, I get to do. I get to set my schedule a certain way. I get to use the tone of voice and kinds of language that I want to use in my classroom. I get to make instructional decisions within my classroom. If I'm a principal, there's different kinds of institutional authority that I get to do and don't get to do. And similarly, if we're a paraprofessional or if we are a playground monitor, it doesn't really matter what position we have some power that's been given to us simply because the institution hired us to do a certain kind of job and fulfill a certain kind of role. And so within that, often we're able to affect change within the places that are in our sphere of influence within our organization. So sometimes it's good to look for the decisions that we can make to directly address the cause of moral injury. So unplug, plug in is this one right here. It's another strategy I like. It's basically the reason why I don't go to any PTA meetings at my kid's school. I have a doctorate in education. I know how important parental involvement is. And I'm going to be involved by making sure my kids show up to school in time and making sure that their homework is done and making sure they have a healthy snack when they go there. Anytime the teacher emails me, I always respond. I get all the paperwork figured out and permission slips done and money sent and all the kinds of stuff that needs to get done. But the PTA meetings are always at a time that's just really hard for me to get to, even if they're on Zoom. It just isn't going to work, and in fact, it causes a lot of stress when I try. And so my friend is the PTA president. I just let her know, I'm so sorry, I'm not going to be going to any meetings, but I will absolutely volunteer at any fall festival or spring festival you want. Just let me know when, and I'll be there. And so sometimes when we can unplug from responsibilities that we really don't have to do, that we're able to say no to, and we can plug into the kinds of committees and extra work and those kinds of things that do feed our soul, and then those are things that can be really important to addressing moral injury. Now, we're going to talk about those specifically: direct action, and then creative noncompliance as sources of power that we can use right now without anyone's permission to address moral injury that we might be experiencing in the workplaces that we're serving in. Let's start with direct action. Direct action is when we solve a problem using our own skills, knowledge, and resources. And the mantra of direct action is to ask for forgiveness instead of permission. And my favorite real life example of this is from a friend of mine who just had to install an air conditioner all by themselves. And the reason why is, living here where we do in the desert, there's this predictable phenomenon that happens in schools all across Arizona, where it's the day before school and suddenly the air conditioner goes out in half the building. And there's always it's just a lot of work and a lot of effort it takes to get that solved. There's a principal that I know who this just wasn't getting solved. It was just weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, all the way into September, where it is hot here, and they're doing all kinds of things to keep kids cool in this particular school. And all of a sudden, a parent says, "Hey, you know what? I found a window unit. I'm happy to install it for you." And the principal here said, "Well, I'm handy myself. Let's install it together." And so it is absolutely against protocol in most school districts to install air conditioning units on your own. However, there was no amount of begging facilities to help in this particular situation, and she was tired of sending kids into classrooms that she would absolutely not want her family to be learning in. And so what they did was they just worked together and installed one. And yeah, caused maybe just a little bit of good trouble for a little while, but the bottom line was, kids needed a safe place to learn, and she was not going to wait one more second than she had to solve this problem. And so she took direct action to do it. And so a lot of times we can step into our brave and step into our power to directly address the cause of our moral injury. And so not only does that reduce the risk that we're going to experience compassion fatigue, secondary traumatic stress, or burnout, but it also empowers us and gives us a sense of agency sometimes when moral injury can leave us feeling hopeless. And so it can take a little bit of brave, or a lot of brave, depending on the organizations that we work in, but direct action is an effective tool for addressing moral injury. And so in the live session, what we'll do is we think of a solvable problem for our immediate workspace. That wherever we might happen to be, think of something that's going on that somebody really could solve if they wanted to. And we just kind of we'll plop it up on the screen and we take a look at it. And then the next thing that we do is we think about it in this kind of way. All right, so we take one of those problems that's happening within our immediate workspace. We think about what needs to happen to solve that problem. If I could wave some kind of magic wand to get anybody to do anything to solve that problem that's going on, what action needs to happen to make it fixed so that we're not experiencing the moral injury anymore? And then we think about, what if I just did it? What if I just did it? Now, sometimes the answer to that question is, if I just did it, I get fired, and so I'm not gonna. And that makes perfect sense. That's not an opportunity for direct action. But sometimes I actually kind of can. I could just, put up this project on DonorsChoose, get it funded, and just do it myself. If the budget isn't there to do what I need to do, then I can just make a budget through DonorsChoose somehow. And there's lots of ways that direct action is possible. But I think we can really step into our brave here and figure out when direct action is appropriate and when it isn't by just considering, what if I just did it? If there's a problem and there's a certain kind of action that's required to solve it, and I could just do it, Perhaps asking for forgiveness is better than permission sometimes if it means that our moral injury goes down and our risk for experiencing the cost of caring goes down as well. Another strategy that we can use to step into our brave is called creative noncompliance. Now, creative noncompliance, I want to be very clear here. Creative noncompliance is not an invitation to go breaking policies and put ourselves at risk for losing jobs or being disrespectful to anyone. That's not what creative noncompliance is. Creative noncompliance is when we find ways to get the work done that respect institutional authority as well as honor our values. And a real life example is a behavior management system that's infamous within elementary schools, and it's called the traffic light. And the idea is that, oh my goodness, everyone has a clothespin and it's on this traffic light that's been laminated, installed somewhere. And then, every time a teacher needs to talk to you about your behavior, you got to move your clip up to yellow. And then if you're really bad, you got to move it to red. And it's there for everybody to see. It's a very problematic approach to behavior management. Namely because the only way to go is just worse on the traffic light. But there's lots of other kinds of things too. And there was a teacher that was talking to me about this and was thinking, oh, you know what? I know an example of creative noncompliance. One time it was expected that the entire school use traffic lights for classroom management. And I decided that, you know what? I really feel that I can manage behavior better with private one-on-one conversations where we really make sure that whatever consequence I assign is going to help teach the student, the other side of their mistake rather than simply punish or shame. And I just don't think this traffic light is going to do that. In fact, if anything, this traffic light is going to make things worse given the way that I know my classroom runs best. So here's the thing. I know I can't say no to the traffic light, but that doesn't mean I have to use it. I'll just install the traffic light here, keep all the clothespins on green, and continue to have private conversations where I manage behaviors inside my classroom. And that was a marvelous example of creative noncompliance, where we were respecting institutional authority, but honoring our values at the same time. Another real life example is one from a PBIS store. Now, I do lots and lots and lots of training in positive behavior intervention supports, also known as PBIS. And a lot of schools go about positive behavior intervention supports through something called a PBIS store, where kids can, if they're good, they can earn tickets, and then they can take those tickets and spend them at a store for prizes and stuff like that. I am not about that. And this particular school counselor was also not about that. And the main reason they were not about it was because they don't want to monetize praise or monetize recognition. It just felt very icky, felt like bribery. It felt like training students to perform for a bag of chips. Those are my words. Those weren't their words. But they were directed to run the PBIS store one day a week. And when it was their turn, they decided, you know what? Instead of charging people tickets, everything is free. As long as you tell me something good that you've done, some way that you've brought some extra joy to our community and lived our school values out loud here, then you can choose the prize that you want from the store right here. And so I love that one because you know what? If the institution requires the store to happen, that's great. But I'm only going to participate in this in a way that feels good to me. And with thinking of some creativity here, we can work out a way to engage in some creative noncompliance where nothing gets, we're not tossing hand grenades into the system necessarily just yet, but we're going to monitor our own participation in that system so that we're not at risk for experiencing moral injury and we reduce our risk for experiencing those costs of caring. Creative noncompliance does require us to step into our brave somewhat. Sometimes it requires us to think a little bit about, okay, well, how can I creatively engage with this particular structure that I'm being asked to participate in when I know I don't want to and I know it violates my values here. But we can do it, and it can be a very empowering way to address moral injury, to step into our brave, to step into our power, and to really take care of ourselves in some powerful ways. So again, our sources of power that we've got available to us are institutional authority and unplug, plug in. Those are two that we didn't cover in this session just for time. But we did talk about direct action and creative noncompliance. And direct action, of course, is when, you know what, there's a problem, and I might not be the one who's supposed to solve this problem, but nobody else is solving the problem, so I'm going to solve it right now. Or I'm going to recruit other people to work with me to solve the problem. And so really what we're trying to do with direct action is, you know what? How long do we need to continue to experience the consequences of inaction? How long do we need to suffer the cost of doing nothing about this thing that is causing us all moral injury? And if we can find ways to say no more, not one more minute, in fact, then that can be a very empowering way for us to step into our power, to step into our brave, to address moral injury, reduce it so that we are not experiencing nearly as much of any of those costs of caring, and we might actually start to experience compassion satisfaction as well. Creative noncompliance is another marvelous source of power that any of us in any particular place in our organization can use to address moral injury. And creative noncompliance, again, is not about saying, no, I'm not going to do the thing that you told me. It's about a way of participating in a system that isn't going to violate your values as much, or even at all, if we can be creative enough. Now, creative noncompliance is great because it allows us some time and some space to really think about what it is that it is causing this moral injury in this particular situation, and how I can continue to participate in the system that allows me to do the work that I want to do, but to do it in a way that doesn't violate my values, or doesn't require me to work beyond the resources and authority that I've actually been given. So again, when we think about it, we've got compassion fatigue, secondary traumatic stress, and burnout. And moral injury really is the thing at the center of all of that fidget spinner right here. And so as we work on addressing the moral injury, our risk of experiencing compassion fatigue, secondary traumatic stress, and burnout is much, much less. But address moral injury, we're going to do that we're going to reduce the cost of caring by addressing moral injury. So the more that we address moral injury, the more likely it is that we can reduce the cost of caring. But once we've done everything we can do to address moral injury, that's when it makes sense for us to talk about self-care. So you'll notice that we have done nothing up until this point of saying, hey, you know what? Yoga is good. We've done nothing to talk about, hey, you know what? Make sure you drink enough water. Make sure that you're stretching and standing. And, I've got this Apple Watch that wants me to, close my rings and burn enough calories in the day and stuff. All of those are great, but it doesn't make any sense to talk about any of that until we've talked about some strategies that we can use to address our moral injury. Now, once we have done everything we can, that's when self-care strategies start to make sense. And I like to talk about self-care through a very specific way called the 8 dimensions of wellness right here. Now, one of the things that I would like to do is, this is the part of our session where I either ruin your favorite children's book, or I absolutely validate things that you've always felt about this particular story. Now, you should have had emailed to you a copy of the 8 dimensions of wellness. And the 8 dimensions of wellness are these ones right here: the physical, emotional, spiritual, financial, intellectual, social, vocational, and environmental. And physical, of course, is just caring for our bodies. Emotional wellness is caring for, it really is about emotional intelligence and how do we manage and regulate our feelings in healthy ways. Spiritual can be a dimension of wellness that we engage through a community of faith, but it doesn't have to be. Spiritual wellness really is about living a life that is aligned with what we view our purpose to be. And if we're unsure of what our purpose is, then spiritual wellness is finding out what we feel our purpose might be and living in ways that honor that and figuring out whether or not that truly does align. Financial wellness is managing the dollars and cents, making sure that we have the resources we need to take care of ourselves and the people that matter to us. Now, financial wellness is important no matter how much money we make, whether we make a lot of money or a little money, making sure that every dollar has a job and that job is and then our dollars are doing the jobs that we want. That's important. Intellectual wellness is really interesting, especially when I talk to educators. We would think that as educators, intellectual wellness is something that we do an awful lot of, but often intellectual wellness is one of those dimensions of wellness that we don't attend to very well. And in the sense of, am I going to take a class in something just because I want to learn it? It doesn't have to be related to work, just because I want to know. Honestly, I used to be a very big reader, but in these last few months, I have not been reading my books at all. And that's a dimension of wellness that I think I'm going to be addressing in the next little bit. Social wellness. Do I have communities of support around me? Do I have friendships that mean something to me? Am I able to exit relationships that aren't healthy for me anymore? So those are really big things with social wellness. Vocational wellness. Am I engaged in work that feeds me? Most of us chose work in our caring professions, whether it's in education or healthcare or in social work or whatever it is that we're doing the work that we do because we believe it feeds our soul somehow, because we feel that we're called to do it, that we really are meant to be doing the work that we do. Well, a lot of times we can find ourselves doing lots of work that just isn't feeding our soul necessarily. And so what can we do to build the skills that we need to do the kind of work that matters to us? Environmental wellness is one that I think is really neat. Environmental wellness has two dimensions to it, two parts to it. And one part of environmental wellness really is like being in nature. I'm lucky because here in Tucson, it's really easy to get out into the desert and go see some really beautiful stuff. We can get into forests really quickly if I want to, just by driving up Mount Lemmon. It's not too far at all. Environmental wellness can even be just taking a walk around the block if I've been inside for all day long. Or when I was a principal, I would make sure to go be out on the playground during recess time, number one, just to help the monitors supervise, but also just to be outside and enjoy some sunlight. And so environmental wellness has that dimension. The other dimension is my space organized? Is it clean? Could I put a houseplant somewhere and make it bright and make it nice? Do I have if I don't like the fluorescent lights and the way they buzz, can I use some other kinds of lighting in my learning space that feel better for me? So environmental wellness has both kind of a getting out into nature component as well as just what is the general order and cleanliness and aesthetic of my work environment and home environment look like. And so thinking about those 8 dimensions of wellness that you had emailed to you, I'd like us to take a listen to the Giving Tree right now. Now, if you love the Giving Tree, if you don't love the Giving Tree, or if you've never heard the Giving Tree before, that's completely fine, because wherever you're at with it right now is a perfectly beautiful place to be. What I'd like to do is for us to think about just for a moment, what might it be like if we were Tree's best friend? Are there some dimensions of wellness that we might recommend that Tree engage in as we listen to this story right here? So as we listen, what I'd like to do is just consider for a second what it might be like for us if we didn't necessarily think about this like from Tree's perspective, but we thought about it as though we were Tree's best friend. What dimensions of wellness might we recommend?
The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. Once there was a tree, and she loved a little boy. And every day the boy would come, and he would gather her leaves and make them into crowns and play king of the forest. He would climb up her trunk and swing from her branches and eat apples. And they would play hide and go seek. And when he was tired, he would sleep in her shade. And the boy loved the tree very much, and the tree was happy. But time went by, and the boy grew older. And the tree was often alone. Then one day the boy came to the tree, and the tree said, "Come, boy, come and climb up my trunk, and swing from my branches, and eat apples, and play in my shade, and be happy." "I am too big to climb and play," said the boy. "I want to buy things and have fun. I want some money. Can you give me some money?" "I'm sorry," said the tree, "but I have no money. I have only leaves and apples. Take my apples, boy, and sell them in the city. Then you will have money, and you will be happy." And so the boy climbed up the tree and gathered her apples and carried them away, and the tree was happy. But the boy stayed away for a long time, and the tree was sad. And then one day the boy came back, and the tree shook with joy, and she said, "Come, boy, climb up my trunk, and swing from my branches, and be happy." "I am too busy to climb trees," said the boy. "I want a house to keep me warm," he said. "I want a wife, and I want children, and so I need a house. Can you give me a house?" "I have no house," said the tree. "The forest is my house, but you may cut off my branches and build a house. Then you will be happy." And so the boy cut off her branches and carried them away to build his house. And the tree was happy. But the boy stayed away for a long time, and when he came back, the tree was so happy she could hardly speak. "Come, boy," she whispered, "come and play."
I am too old and sad to play, said the boy. I want a boat that will take me far away from here. Can you give me a boat?
Cut down my trunk and make a boat, said the tree. Then you can sail away and be happy. And so the boy cut down her trunk and made a boat and sailed away. And the tree was happy, but not really. And after a long time, the boy came back again. I am sorry, boy, said the tree, but I have nothing left to give you. My apples are gone.
My teeth are too weak for apples, said the boy.
My branches are gone, said the tree. You cannot swing on them.
I am too old to swing on branches, said the boy.
My trunk is gone, said the tree. You cannot climb.
I am too tired to climb, said the boy.
I am sorry, sighed the tree. I wish that I could give you something, but I have nothing left. I am just an old stump. I am sorry.
I don't need very much now, said the boy. Just a quiet place to sit and rest. I am very tired.
Well, said the tree, straightening herself up as much as she could, while an old stump is good for sitting and resting, come, boy, sit down and rest. And the boy did, and the tree was happy.
The tree was happy. So the invitation was to think about the 8 dimensions of wellness that were emailed to you and to really think about, as the tree's best friend, could you pull one of those 8 dimensions of wellness out and perhaps, I don't know, pretend like you were tree's best friend, pick a dimension or two for tree, and then write down what you might say. And then so if you would, the invitation is to perhaps pause this video, choose a dimension of wellness that seems to be appropriate for tree, and then write down what you might say. And just so you know, people will pick any number of dimensions of wellness for this one. They might pick spiritual or financial or any kind of dimension of wellness here. And it's really just lovely to hear just what words of advice they might have to have for tree right now, thinking of tree as their own best friend. All right, so as we take a look at the giving tree, it's really common for people to feel kind of sad, to be honest, at the end of that. We are working, caring professions that absolutely will take 110% of us if we let it. And so a lot of us feel like stumps, just like Tree did at the end of this. And I just wanted to present to you, here's an alternate ending by Topher Payne. And Topher Payne, he does a lot of work called like fixing children's books. And I was just delighted by this particular ending to the giving tree right here. And so what I would love for us to do is just take those dimensions of wellness out again. And as you notice the tree in this story do something different, where the tree is actually going to engage in different dimensions of wellness. Now, I don't think that Topher Payne knows anything about the 8 dimensions of wellness necessarily, but one of the things that's really interesting is you might see a lot of the dimensions of wellness show up in this alternate ending to Shel Silverstein's The Giving Tree.
The Tree Who Set Healthy Boundaries by Topher Payne, an alternate ending to Shel Silverstein's The Giving Tree, created for the Atlanta Artist Relief Fund Storytime. But the boy stayed away for a long time, and the tree was sad. And then one day the boy came back, and the tree shook with joy. And she said, "Come, boy, climb up my trunk and swing from my branches and be happy." "I am too busy to climb trees," said the boy. "I want a house to keep me warm," he said. "I want a wife, and I want children, and so I need a house. Can you give me a house?" And the tree said, "Okay, hold up. This is already getting out of hand. Look, I was fine with giving you the apples to help you get on your feet. They'll grow back next season anyway. But no, I'm not giving you a house. You know, I've seen boys like you pull this nonsense with other trees in the forest. First it's the apples, then branches, then the trunk. And before you know it, that mighty beautiful tree is just a sad little stump. Well, look here, boy. I love you like family, but I am not going down like that." And while we're on the subject, the tree said, grabbing him by the collar of his shirt, "I recognize friendships evolve over time, and we may not see each other as often because you don't have time for your tree friends. But we used to be real tight. Now it feels like I only see you when you need something. How do you think that makes me feel?" The boy took a long breath, felt a sour rumble in his stomach, because he realized he hadn't considered his friend's feelings. "I bet it makes you feel bad," said the boy. Yes, boy, bad. I can't even remember the last time you asked me how I'm doing. How are you, tree? Asked the boy. He sincerely wanted to know. So the tree told the boy all the gossip from the forest and introduced him to the family of red squirrels that had moved into her trunk. While she was glad for the company the squirrels provided, she was concerned about the long-term health effects of hosting a burrow. So the boy called the local arborist, who explained the squirrels don't eat wood. They only build nests in pre-existing holes, so the tree was in no danger. The tree was so relieved, and so was the boy. He loved his friend and was concerned about her long-term health because she had taught him the importance of empathy. And so it continued, the tree and the boy looking out for each other like that, both of them content in the knowledge that someone had their back. The boy attended culinary school. The tree took courses online and got her certification in small business management. They did their homework together nearly every day. The boy became a pastry chef. Together, they opened a bakery selling the best apple pies anyone had ever tasted. It turned a profit in the first 18 months, which is most uncommon. Eventually, the boy had a son of his own, and much later, the son of the boy had his own family too. Because of their friendship, the boy was successful and fulfilled, and the tree grew wider and stronger, standing tall and beautiful in the forest for many, many, many years, plus a few years even more than that. And as each generation played in her strong old branches, the tree often thought back to that fateful day when the boy had asked her for a house. In truth, she would have gladly given him her branches to build one, and she would have given him her trunk to build a boat. She loved him that much. But then she would have had nothing left, not for herself nor anyone else. And there never would have been a home for the red squirrels. There would have been no hide and seek with the boy's grandchildren. No bakery with the best apple pies anyone ever tasted. Setting healthy boundaries is a very important part of giving. It assures you always have something left to give. And so the tree was happy. Everyone was. The end.
I hope you enjoy this alternate ending that Topher Payne wrote. And it's just, you can Google it yourself. And and I really like that idea that you know what, we can set healthy boundaries, and that by setting healthy boundaries, it really isn't about keeping anybody away. It's actually about keeping people close to us. And what's also very common as people take a look at this is they'll notice that the tree has engaged in a variety of dimensions of wellness. It is very common when I'm using this slide in live sessions that we notice every single dimension of wellness represented somehow, some way in it, and they're all correct. They're all absolutely correct from wherever it is that we happen to see tree engage in these. And so the dimensions of wellness can be very powerful tools for us for engaging our own self-care. So it's not just necessarily about treating ourselves to a latte or getting our nails done, but hey, I like to get my nails done too from time to time. But a lot of times it can be even deeper than that. It can be, you know what, I'm going to go to the gym, not just because I want to get healthy or blood pressure or anything like that, but because it makes me feel good, because it connects to my social wellness when I'm going with a friend, because because I'm learning some new skills here. It is intellectual wellness. I mean, they're all very, very connected. And very often when we find just one dimension of wellness that we're ready to engage in either some very big way or in some very small way, we notice that the rest of our dimensions of wellness are elevated just by focusing on one or two that we feel ready to get started with. And so the invitation right now would be to just kind of think, choose a card or two that speak to you, and maybe write a sticky note on that dimension of wellness here. Now, the ones that were emailed to you might be a little harder to do the sticky note thing with. You could just kind of make a note on it on the notated one that you got. So just on your first note, just write something big that you could do. And then on a second note, something small that you could do. Now, here's the thing. What feels big to you might be pretty easy to somebody else. And similarly, what feels small to you might just feel very overwhelming and big to somebody else. And so the important thing here is not so much that we are thinking about, oh, is it big enough or is it small enough? It's just, does it feel big? Does it feel small? And you're the one who's going to know best. And the idea here is sometimes we are ready to do something very big. We're ready to sign up for the gym membership and go to the classes and do all the things. Or maybe we're ready to just do something small. Maybe I'm just going to take a short walk around the block, or even shorter than that. And whatever it is perfectly correct. It just matters that we think, that we imagine ourselves engaging those dimensions of wellness, because very often imagination is the first step towards action. So again, I just wanted to share how honored I am to be with you today, and just again to take one last look at the most unfun fidget spinner ever in the world. That we've got these costs of caring, compassion fatigue, secondary traumatic stress, and burnout, all orbiting this central concept of moral injury, of when we're required to work in a way that violates our values, or we are working within a system that fights back against any kind of change that we want to make within it. We are definitely at risk for moral injury here. And there's some steps that we can take to address moral injury. We talked about 4, but the 2 that we most specifically went in depth with were direct action and creative noncompliance. Of course, direct action being that if there's a problem, what if I just solve it myself? What if I use my own skills, knowledge, and talent to solve it myself? Or maybe I might involve a couple people who want to solve it too, and we work together as a team. But the main thing is we're not waiting anymore for a solution to come from somewhere else. We're going to take action and do it ourselves. Now, creative noncompliance is similar, but it's more like I'm not necessarily trying to change anything directly. It's more that if it's something that I really don't have much choice about, can I find a way to creatively comply so that my participation in the system isn't going to put me at risk for moral injury or the cost of caring. And then for everything else, once I've taken action, once I've stepped into my power and addressed moral injury as best I can, what is it that I can do through the 8 dimensions of wellness to practice self-care? Because the self-care really is going to be the best antidote, the best vaccination against compassion fatigue, secondary traumatic stress, and burnout, provided that we have done all we can to address moral injury. Now, in other sessions, we would also talk about how addressing moral injury is not an individual responsibility alone. It is a systemic responsibility. And so what can we do collectively, and even as in leadership capacity, if we're lucky to be in those kinds of roles, to address moral injury in a more systemic kind of way too. So I just want to be real clear here. I'm not saying that it's any individual's responsibility to solve moral injury when they are the victims of it. It's also going to be an organizational, systemic, and leadership responsibility as well. And that's something that gets explored in depth in other kinds of sessions here. And another way of thinking about that idea is thinking about the idea that self-care can be inside out, like we were thinking about with the 8 dimensions of wellness and Tree engaging in those dimensions of wellness in that second one, the Tree who set healthy boundaries. But self-care can also be outside in, when our organizations create space for us to care for ourselves, to address moral injury. And so that's an important consideration that we need to be really thinking about as we engage in this work in self-care. As always, it'd be an absolute pleasure if we can continue the conversation in any kind of way. One way that's fun for me is on Instagram, and you're welcome to follow me on Instagram. That's a way to do that. But mostly, I'm just so grateful that you were here today. Thanks for being here. And as always, may you have as many opportunities to be as good and kind to yourself as you are with those that you serve.